Valley, hooey Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood, where you're terrific if you're even good, where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast. No time for Hollywood. No, damn you, Hollywood. And here's a man who, when it comes to film, he says, now this looks like a job for me, so everybody just follow me because we need a little Robert Winfree.
Wow.
I was practicing that earlier.
Wow.
Off your game.
That's a callback.
We had it in the car going, and let me tell you, I took my kids to their parkour class, and my son said something to me, and I just bursted into now this looks like a job for me, so everybody just follow me. And then I kept saying your name for no good reason. And I'm like, I got to do that on the show tonight.
Well, congratulations. You did, in fact, do that on the show. All right. Since it's just Mark and me, let me just very briefly, before we get into the movie tonight, I feel compelled partially to apologize to you, the listening audience, for last week. Not because I insulted the movie. I don't care. Let There Be Carnage is crap. And I stand by every single negative thing I said about that vapid, shallow, pointless movie. But in my passionate tirade, I turned my ire unfairly onto all of you who enjoyed that. I believe I questioned your parentage, how much your parents loved you, the proximity with which you were raised to...
On a podcast with a parent who brought their children to the movie, by the way.
I know. I questioned the proximity to which you were raised to phenomena that are known or heavily suspected to cause developmental issues.
Who called you out? I got to know. What drove you to this epiphany?
No one in particular.
You just
I got thinking. I thought about it.
Were you visited by the ghost of Christmas movies?
Yeah, sure. Look, one of them was Harvey Weinstein, and I don't want to talk about it.
You just coming through the stairs with VHS tapes chained to his body. Robert Winfree.
He warned me about what would happen in my future if I did not mend my ways.
Yeah.
So the point being, you people don't come here to be insulted. You come here to hear a movie review, and I insulted you for no good reason. Except one of you, and you know who you are. The rest of you, you don't deserve to be insulted for your taste in entertainment, especially something, as I've mentioned, somewhat anodyne, vapid, and shallow as Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And you didn't deserve it. I apologize for whatever my apology's worth. I am sorry, and I will do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Mea culpa.
No Time to Die. We talked.
Yeah.
So a little ways back, Sean Garmer was like, "Hey, you should release all your stuff before the movie because after the movie, nobody cares anymore." And the unintended consequence of doing that was it forces me to go back and listen to some of the stuff that we've talked about leading into one of the franchise movies that we're doing. Like, it doesn't matter with a movie like Malignant or Cry Macho.
Yeah.
But for like No Time to Die, we had shit tons of content that came out before No Time to Die, and I listened to it all, and I was reminded of how I felt about Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre. But more importantly, and more to the point that I wanted to get at for table setting tonight, I got to hear your thoughts on Bond, and we don't need to go over all of it again, but you and I were talking last night before our marathon review of Midnight Mass, and this goes to the review. That's why I'm talking about it now. I listened to myself review Casino Royale for Long Road to Ruin and talked about how it was nice to see Bond return to the suave spy and not the and not one of the many nameless, faceless, ever emerging action heroes. Like Bond to me was always different than all of that. And I think that might be because I grew up with the Roger Moore Bonds. And then, I know the generation before that grew up with Sean Connery. I think in the Pierce Brosnan and Timothy Dalton era is where Bond starts to flip and becomes more action hero than he does spy. And so I think with Casino Royale, I was like, oh, good, we're getting back to that again. And then over the course of the Daniel Craig Bonds, finally ending with No Time to Die, it seems like they went completely back on that altogether. And that ultimately is my biggest issue with the movie. But I wanted to just talk to you and get your opinion on the whole Bond as spy, Bond as soldier thing.
It's always been a bit of a tough road to walk, especially in modern cinema, for the character of James Bond, because the entire espionage genre these days is not actually about espionage anymore.
No, we did a lot of comparisons to the Bourne trilogy for that reason.
Yeah, for the worse for a lot of it, with a variety of reasons. And I think this movie more than I think some of the others, that the direction that this iteration of Bond took overall, there's some chickens that come home to roost in this particular movie as far as that goes. But let's save that for the film itself. Bond as spy is always the more interesting version of James Bond. And the better versions of the Pierce Brosnan era, I think, walked the line correctly. Because while there were the action set pieces and there was gunplay and you'd get you'd get the big stuff, but you always got, not always, but in the good ones, you pretty much always got him being a spy. You got him getting his briefing, him learning what's going on, him trying to figure out what's going on, being a little bit behind the curve. The actual spy craft was part of it. Now, some of it was a bit more ridiculous than others, but it was still an integral part of the story. The dumb ones, and I really do enjoy Pierce Brosnan as Bond. I think it's a crying shame he had such terrible material for at least half of his run.
Everybody loves GoldenEye.
Sure. And there's a couple of others of his that I file more under guilty pleasures. But he had such poor they just got sillier and sillier and sillier. And then Mike Myers, the little weasel, because Austin Powers kind of blew up the entire James Bond, what a Bond movie was, and just blew it up.
Right.
But that whole thing is another. We'll get to that particular discussion later. These movies, I think these films suffer from a couple of problems. And this is a slightly more overarching problem, but they wanted to have a continuous story about Daniel Craig's version of James Bond, essentially from start to finish.
Right.
Which is not a bad thing. But when you're swapping the writing team and the creative direction and the directors every movie, you lack the don't get me wrong. This is not the only problem with the franchise I'm about to mention. But the sequel trilogy in Star Wars suffers.
Damn it! That's exactly where I was going.
A big problem with it, not the only problem, but a big one, is there's no cohesive vision from start to finish. Say whatever you want to about the prequels, there's a cohesive story being told. Right. The problem that the Daniel Craig James Bond movies run into is they wanted something like that, but nobody was given proper overarching direction for it in a creative sense.
I don't think we knew what the story was. I think it was the old dramatic exercise of somebody starts a story and then you tag the next person and they start the story, but they can continue it in their own way.
What do they call that? Popcorn writing?
Something like that. Yeah. I don't, J.J. Abrams, in defense of the Star Wars thing, I think he had a vision, but he wasn't allowed to execute said vision. He had to hand it off to Rian Johnson, and Rian Johnson was supposed to hand it off to, I think, Josh Trank, but or somebody, I don't remember who. I know Josh Trank was somebody who was hired and fired of the dozen guys that were throughout the Star Wars movies.
There were a lot of names thrown around for that third movie potentially, and
so point being, I don't think, so J.J. Abrams had an end game, but because of the way Lucasfilm was being run at the time, wasn't really allowed to do kind of a Kevin Feige very strict track to keep things on.
For the record, I think you're giving J.J. Abrams way too much credit. I've suffered through enough of that man's television to question his long-term planning abilities.
I'm not saying how specific the plan was. But I don't think that, I mean, when you think about when did Casino Royale come out? It was like the early 2000s?
2003, I want to say.
Right. We're talking like a 20-year journey here. They didn't know how. There's no way 20 years ago when MGM and Eon Productions was like, let's do a gritty James Bond, but let's start from the beginning and not do just a kind of compartmentalized episodic James Bond. Let's just start again, start from the beginning, James Bond day one with Casino Royale and go from there. What if it bombs? What if, who knew what they were going to do? They had no idea that in 2019 or 2020, when this was supposed to come out, what this end result was going to be. So that's a big issue with No Time to Die, is that
it really is.
It's kind of, here's a bunch of broken toys and tools and bits of glass, and just do something with it, because that's all we got left.
And for some reason, the creative director in this case decided to set fire to it and collect the insurance money.
So wrapping up our thoughts about, the evolution of James Bond, because I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is why I'm making a big deal about it now. I feel like I could name just a half a dozen, and most of them were in the Expendables movies, better action hero characters than James Bond. For me, James Bond doesn't work as just a straight up macho, muscular, sweaty commando action guy. James Bond works with martinis and suits and gadgetry and slickness and slyness, and it almost elevates the action medium in that way. When you take that all away from him and you do it 20 years later, it's an old guy running around with a rifle, and you've lost me, quite frankly, as an audience member. I'll let you have the last word on this, and we'll move on.
There was a serious... I had this experience in the theater, okay? Because I'm watching this movie, and it's not quite The Irishman, but boy, is it close. For the record, this movie is 2 hours and 47 minutes, and it really feels that. I want to come back to that when we talk about the craft, but we get to the final sequence where they're invading this island.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching the two of them, they do the cool sequence with the plane that turns into a submarine that then like that's a fine enough sequence, but I'm sitting here watching this going, I don't know why James Bond has to be the one that does this.
Yeah.
They really there's part of the intrigue of James Bond, and I want to get into this in a bit later. Part of the intrigue of watching any character like James Bond is they do things that only they can do.
Well, a spy is not a soldier in the sense that you send soldiers to fight battles. They are warriors. A spy, even if you just sort of reduce this down to what happens in a international combat engagement, spies are the ones that are sent into enemy territory to gather information. Spies and saboteurs are the people who operate under cover of night in enemy territory to give their country an advantage, their army an advantage.
Yeah, well, the thought that I had as this is going on was there's other stuff in this movie that James Bond does that I'm okay with. I'll go along with a bunch of stuff that he does here. Okay, this is James Bond stuff. Might not be my personal favorite variation on what James Bond stuff is, but he's doing James Bond things. And then as they get off, as they're getting out of this improvised submarine, the only thing that went through my head was, why isn't this John Matrix why isn't this Arnold Schwarzenegger as Commando?
Right. Why aren't we sending the Black Hawk Down team in?
Yeah, what is so what about this requires James Bond?
Right.
And ultimately there's not a good answer for that, because there is no good answer for that.
Because he's the hero of the story.
Well, look, he does it because the movie says he has to do it.
Right.
That's why. And unfortunately we get to that point very poorly. And more than that, they don't give him anything that is essential to. They don't give him anything James Bond like to do in the entire finale, and it's not that the finale sucks. I don't think it does. It has problems, but it doesn't suck. But that does. I don't know. It took me a little bit out of the movie by the end of it, and
what are we getting? Go ahead, finish up, and then let's get into the plot.
I think the last thing I want to say, and I'll say this again when we get done with talking about the movie. You know, I do want to give tremendous credit to Daniel Craig. He has been, for his tenure, a genuinely excellent James Bond. One of the best. I don't know where exactly you want to rank him. That's largely a matter of personal preference and largely comes down to less the actor and more the style of movie that they're put in.
Has anyone largely disagreed with the idea that Sean Connery has been and always will be the best Bond?
There's a lot of people that are now saying that Craig has kind of surpassed him. And I can see I'm not going to weigh in on my take on the argument because I don't think it's terribly relevant.
No, I'm not really arguing the point.
Yeah, I can see the for my money, those two are probably 1 and 1A, and which order you choose to put them in is largely personal preference.
I mean, obviously, number one with a bullet is George Lazenby.
Why do you do this? Just why?
Holy sir, don't you understand? So the plot then?
Sure, we can do the plot, I suppose.
This 3-hour epic. Let me tell you, as you're getting yourself seated up for this, I was telling you this last night. I stayed up to watch Dark Side of the Ring Thursday night. That ends at 10 o'clock. That ends at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Went immediately to bed. But I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was covering part of an overnight shift for my relief who had to leave early. So I'm up at 3. I'm at work at 4. And then I go to, and then work ends at 7:30 p.m. I make an 8 o'clock movie. It doesn't start till 8:30 because, trailers, which means I don't get out of this movie until 11:30. And then I get home. The point being, by the time I got to the 8 o'clock movie, I was super tired. And that definitely added to my agitation about this. There are definitely points that I dozed off. And everyone's raving about the Ana de Armas scene where they invade Blofeld's birthday party, whatever it was. And I think I entirely missed it because I don't remember it in the movie at all. Go ahead. I just wanted to share that with you real quick.
Always nice to know that one of us is a professional here about this.
You know what? I'm sorry you never sleep. You just have to recharge your battery, robot. But some of us humans have to actually take a nappy poo every once in a while.
I completely sympathize with that. I love naps, but I also don't fall asleep during movies when I'm supposed to review them.
You should have seen me at the Meg a few years ago. I'm pretty sure people were laughing at me by the end of it.
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure your contribution to that review was, okay, so there's a big shark. And there's Jason Statham.
And there's some Chinese Chinamen getting eaten by the shark.
Yeah, I think that was.
So, Loki.
Loki sucks. I said it. You can deal with it. We open with a flashback to young Madeline Swan, who witnesses her mother slain by who we come to realize is Rami Malek, whose name is... Sorry, I hadn't seen his first name spelled out. They actually call this jackass Lucifer Safin. Who thinks this is clever? Who thinks you swat? Here's what you did, writer. Okay, you went to a couple of California parents and said, if you wanted to name your child Lucifer Satan, how would you spell it? And this is what you got.
Okay.
And you went, brilliant.
Good.
Anyway, he comes to kill Mr. White, who is Madeline's father. He's not there, so he guns down her mother, chases her out onto a frozen lake. She falls through the ice. He decides to save her for nebulous reasons. He rescues her.
Because you can't kill kids and dogs in movies. Go on.
Sorry, I'm collecting myself here.
It's funny to do this on video and see you actually have an aneurysm internally.
We come forward to what would be not too long after the capture of Blofeld at the conclusion of Spectre. Madeline and Bond are enjoying time in Italy. Bond goes to Vesper Lynd's tomb to get closure, I suppose, only to be bombed and ambushed by Spectre thugs, one of them is supposed to be our chief thug. I think they call him Cyclops. Let me just say, Dave Bautista makes a better impression as a Bond henchman in a 3-minute fight scene than this waste of space does in an entire 3-hour movie. He tells him, Bond wants to know how they found him. He says, Madeline's a daughter of Spectre. She's betrayed you. Like everyone does, James. Don't you understand? He's practically doing a bad Blofeld delivery. Bond renders him unconscious, grabs Madeline. They go through a car chase. They escape. But Bond can't trust her anymore. He now thinks she might have betrayed him. So he puts her on a train, says goodbye, says you'll never see me again. But there's a whole other movie to go, so we know that's not true. We then jump forward in time 5 years because there's nothing this iteration of Bond loves more than time skips. But 5 years later, we track a few Spectre operatives as they break into a not even black site bio, what is it, some kind of a laboratory for bioweapons. The character that we primarily follow, who is just bad comic relief, Valdo Obrachev, is called by some mysterious force that says Spectre is coming, follow the plan. He says, yes, master. He does his best Renfield impression. Spectre agents show up, kill all the scientists except him. They head out. I'll get into how stupid this bioweapon is in a minute, but they head out. We then come over to James Bond, who is living a quiet, retired life in the woods deliberately in Jamaica. He is approached by old CIA buddy Felix Leiter and a State Department colleague, Logan Ash. They want his help in finding this particular scientist and figuring out what's going on. They've kind of tracked him to Cuba. We're introduced to the new 007. What's her name? Naomie?
Captain Marvel.
Not quite.
It's Lashana Lynch. And yeah,
Naomie.
Naomie or Nami or Namaste.
It's an O, so I'm going with Naomie.
Okay.
Who tells him to stay out of her way.
Because she don't need no stinking man.
I just need to say briefly, I love the fact that they gave her this enormous chip on her shoulder, and it comes across as unpleasant as it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Like, they don't paint her. Like, the problem with Captain Marvel was they tried to paint her as this paradigm. And no, when I said Captain Marvel, I meant like the Black Captain Marvel from the comic books. Because isn't that what? Haven't read them.
Okay, I believe. Never. Just keep going.
So they head to Cuba. He makes contact with a local CIA agent. They bust up a Spectre meeting where all the Spectre head honchos have gathered to celebrate Blofeld's birthday. We find out that Blofeld is kind of remotely controlling this whole action and plans to kill Bond with this Project Heracles stuff, which we'll get to in a second. And Blofeld, having anticipated Bond being here and finding out about it in one way or another, he releases a bunch of Heracles onto the party, but this is where the double turn from Obrachev kicks in, and all of the Spectre honchos start dying horribly while Bond is left perfectly fine. There's a gunfight and a chase scene, and Bond is able to get the scientist back to the CIA shrimp boat, I think it was, where he meets up with Felix and Logan Ash. They interrogate Obrachev, at which point it comes out that Logan Ash is in fact a double agent working for Safin. Seraphim, Paraffin, Saffron. I don't know. Rami Malek, Freddie Mercury with a burned up face. He's working with them. There's another fight. Felix dies, sadly. Bond is picked up by a cargo ship. He returns to England and confronts his old MI5 colleagues about what? MI6. MI5 is domestic. MI6 is international. He confronts his old MI6 colleagues, most notably Ray Fiennes as M, because Bond knows what Project Heracles is, and this is where we kind of get the info dump about that. It's not just a plague, Mark. It's my least favorite thing in crappy cinema. It's nanobots.
Yeah, buddy.
I rolled so hard in the theater.
Yes, sir.
So hard. They're nanobots that can be encoded with a person's DNA. And if they then make physical contact, they proceed to attack, cause cellular decay, and kill you. And it's meant, you can see the intent. The intent is to be able to get this on someone, and it will then transfer around until it gets to the person you need it to get to quietly, and it won't cause any collateral damage. And you can see the thought experiment, but now it's been captured by this other entity, and Safin is using it to wipe out Spectre, and in fact has at this point killed everyone except Blofeld. This is where we're reintroduced to Madeline Swan, because she is the therapist that is treating Blofeld in his in the raft. I forget where it was exactly. Marshfeld, I think.
Marshfeld.
Belmarsh. Rami Malek shows up and tells Madeline that he is the author of all her pain. And gives her some of the nanobots in the form of perfume, and just take this into proximity with Blofeld and then it'll do the rest. And Bond shows up and there's an awkward meeting between them. Bond and Blofeld talk, and Blofeld, this movie makes better use of Christoph Waltz and Blofeld than the entire movie designed around him. He gets the best line here about when he talks to Bond. He says, well, I just, I suppose you came all this way. I should tell you. He tells him a little bit, but mostly just that Madeline is the one with all of the answers.
Right.
And then he says, well, but you did come all this way to talk to me, so I suppose I should give you something. Madeline never betrayed you. I just set up a perpetual ambush and waiting at Vesper's grave, figuring you'd go there sooner or later. And then you fell right for it. I wanted you dead, but having you live in an empty, hollow world devoid of human connection is the next best thing. Look at your life and how pointless it is. And Bond loses his crap and tries to strangle him, gains composure, but he had touched Madeline and transferred the nanobots from her to him, and then he touches Blofeld, so they get to him, they kill Blofeld. Bond goes to see her at her ancestral home in Norway. Don't know why they're speaking French then, but okay. But while there...
For the same reason that in American movies, anyone who's from a foreign land speaks British.
Fair enough. While there, he encounters Madeline's daughter, who is... I love the way the pitch meeting did this, so I'm gonna steal from Ryan. And yeah, this is totally not your daughter. You have a daughter, not your daughter. He shows up and Bond's like, "Oh, you have a kid," and immediately Madeline goes, "Yeah, she's not yours," and we all just roll our eyes. Like, really? We're doing this? They spend time. They somewhat reconnect. More stuff happens. Turns out they're being tracked. The three of them try to make a run for it. There's a car chase. There's a gunfight in the woods. Rami Malek is able to abduct them and takes them to his island. It's a converted factory that used to be a submarine bay in an island that is in waters that are somewhat disputed territory between Russia and Japan. And we now get the full breadth of what Rami Malek is planning. He has been mass producing these nanobots, and he's encoded thousands of individual people into this, and he plans on selling this stuff to whoever wants to get it. And nefarious, pointless, oh God, I'll get to it. The world is at stake. Don't you understand, Mark? Chaos, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. So we have to save the world. So Bond and Naomie infiltrate this particular base. They discover the full breadth of what's going on. They get hemmed up. There's a lot of gunplay. James Bond goes to have a conversation with Rami Malek because, for no reason other than this is what you have to do in a James Bond movie at some point. They talk. Sort of. Bond is able to kill all the guards. Rami Malek escapes. Bond decides that the best way to deal with this is to open up the blast shields and then have one of the British cruisers that's somewhat in vicinity fire missiles at this particular place and blow it off the map. This is the only way to deal with what's going on. So he sends Madeline and their daughter and Naomie, and he sends them off. He goes to open the blast doors. He does so, but on his way out, they start closing again. He is then shot by Rami Malek. They fight. Rami Malek infects him with nanobots, these ones in particular coded to kill Madeline and their daughter. So poor James Bond can never physically touch his the love of his life or his child. And Bond has been shot and now told that I can't ever touch the people I love again, so he just shoots Rami Malek a few times after letting him monologue for far too long.
Mm-hmm.
Goes and reopens the blast doors and decides that, you know what, I've had a good run. I mean, never mind that I work for one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, and I'm sure they can come up with a way to defuse, I'll get to the nanobots later. But he just decides, you know what? I've been shot. I'm tired. I'm just going to sit here and get blown up. And he does. The missiles come in. They blow the facility all to hell. James Bond is dead. In the aftermath of this, all of his colleagues at MI6 hold a brief remembrance, and then they get back to work, while Madeline pledges to tell her daughter about the type of man her father was. And movie, and per usual, we get the credits that James Bond will return. I mean, Daniel Craig won't, and I'm going to yell about this later. But end scene, end tenure of Daniel Craig as James Bond. And 3 hours of my life. God.
So I think there's a more dinosaurs here thing going on.
Just a bit.
I'm referring specifically to the length of the film. I think people saw what they did with the Return of the King, and it's okay, any kind of conclusion to an epic tale has to hit the 3 hour mark. So what's the most...
It really doesn't.
Well, what's the most modern example of this? And it's kind of... Marvel, for all of its joy that it's brought people, has really been, in a lot of ways, a disaster for the film industry.
Boy, you ain't kidding.
In this way only. I'm not necessarily referring to content. I know that's part of your issue with it, but I don't care about that. You want good content, go see Titan and Zola and Lamb and Pig and any other any other indie movie that was named after a farm animal this year. For the rest of us mortals, the fact that the Marvel movies are silly popcorn movies is sort of immaterial. The effect that Marvel had on the film industry, relating back to James Bond, is it was successful in the things that it did, but no one ever takes the time in positions of film power to ask the question, why was this successful and why it's not always going to be successful anytime it's tried everywhere else. So, for example, Marvel does the sort of chapter and verse, long form storytelling that leads to Avengers and then ultimately to Endgame, and it makes billions and billions of dollars. And, just as an example, Warner Brothers looks at that and goes, we should do that. We don't know why it's working, but let's just copy what Marvel's doing and we'll make billions of dollars too. And of course they don't. And we've covered that ad nauseum. So kind of a similar thing here. Return of the King does a 3-hour movie concluding J.R.R. Tolkien's epic fantasy trilogy. And for whatever the arguments are about the multiple endings bit, that was a movie that earned its ending, all of them. Endgame was a movie that earned its ending. It earned the right to be 3 hours and slowly but surely walk down the flight of stairs to get to the final conclusion, and it ends almost perfectly. In many cases, it ends perfectly. But I think a lot of people in Hollywood, this film being a prime example, is going, well, this is the end of an epic James Bond 5 film run, so it has to be 3 hours, and and it has to have like this epic conclusion, and we have to kill James. We have to, and it's like, okay, if you don't earn it, it's not going to work. And here's the thing. The Daniel Craig James Bond movies have a slight thread that goes through them that gets you from Casino Royale to No Time to Die, but it's not Lord of the Rings and it's not the Avengers.
No, it was as mentioned at the top, it wasn't that well planned out.
No. So that's my point. Like, you're ultimately mourning the loss of Daniel Craig than you are James Bond by the end of this. And if you're not like sentimentally attached to Daniel Craig in this role, boy, is like the needless buildup of 3 hours and then finally concluding with a glorious explosion. You're like, who fucking cares? And that is the beginning of my problem with this movie. It's not just the length. I can watch a 3-hour movie. Clearly, I just named 2 of them. Had Star Wars had the Revenge of the Sith been 3 hours, I think it's like 2.5. But had it gotten to the 2:45, 3-hour mark, at least that would have earned it too.
You could argue that, yeah.
As good or bad as you think those movies are, there was at least a through thread that it had earned the right to be that long. The sequel trilogy doesn't, by the way, in case anyone was wondering where I stood on that.
No.
In any case, just kind of going through some of my thoughts as I watched this thing when I was awake for it. It feels like the movie has trouble figuring out how to do James Bond in the woke cancel culture 2020s. And, the misogynist, womanizing James Bond is not something that sits well with not everybody, but many people in the modern audience.
Oh, man. If you went back and re-listened to some of our stuff, you remember the blowback they got for his sequence with Monica Bellucci in Spectre.
Yeah, well, I also remember the joke I made, which made you uncomfortable. And then listening back to it, probably crossed the line there. What are you going to do?
It's more that I think that scene in particular was taken way out of context and way overblown by people looking to be offended.
The substitute for it is James Bond jostles what's the love of his life's name? I can't remember.
Madeline.
Yeah, James Bond jostles Madeline once or twice. That's it. That's what they've had to reduce James Bond to. And I'm not one of these people who looking at Timothy Dalton on the motorcycle and comparing it to Daniel Craig on the back of a moped with Lashana Lynch.
That was not.
It was Pierce Brosnan.
And for the record, that was Pierce Brosnan and Michelle Yeoh. And
well, the point is, I remember in our private chat, we put that post up and that picture up, and someone got bent out of shape about it. It's not that. I don't so much care that you have to try to figure out how James Bond fits in a modern context. It's the things you're choosing don't work either. Him grabbing her by the arm and jostling her a little bit doesn't substitute for all the things about James Bond you either really, really hate or you really, really like. It doesn't make up for that in any kind of way. And so, which goes to another issue. I guess they started in with the Madeline stuff in Spectre. I don't remember anymore. But it doesn't. So the fact that what you're supposed to get is I guess by the end of Spectre, he was walking away from being a spy and he was going to settle in with Madeline.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of this one, it all gets blown up for a variety of reasons. And as an audience member, you're supposed to feel for James Bond. You're supposed to feel for her and be heartbroken that they're, that these star-crossed lovers had everything turned on its head, and I felt nothing. And that's not because I'm a robot. I don't think.
You sure?
I don't think there was enough film investment through 5 movies to where if you're going, it was all the way built up and then you broke it apart. I don't feel like there was enough invested in their relationship to get the audience reaction that you were looking for there. So a lot of the James Bond Madeline stuff doesn't really work for me. I don't feel like it was written well enough for what they were going for. Also, Madeline has, at least in this movie, no personality other than mousy and embarrassed, it feels like. That's like her entire character. It's kind of, that's it. That's all she does. And lies about her daughter.
Yeah, exactly like that with the hand gestures
and
the accent changes. Yeah, it's an uncanny little.
I am quite the impressionist.
Yeah.
So a couple. It's just so I'm not completely negative. There are things I liked about this. I like the initial motorcycle chase. It is funny to me because we complained about like Black Widow falling from the moon. And or out of a building, and not nary a scratch on her. How is it that James Bond can be standing as close as I am to my computer to an explosion, and he gets mildly jostled and some dirt on him? Like, I understand you're not going to kill him off in the first 5 minutes of the movie, but then orchestrate your explosion trap a little bit better so that it is at least somewhat believable. I went over this with I think it was Skyfall, wasn't it? Where the car flips over 87 times. I'm like, that's dead.
That's Casino Royale.
Okay. Well, there was something I complained about Skyfall too, where it was utterly ridiculous.
I think your big gripe about Skyfall was the plan to get it killing M, and like there's a few too many intricacies for your taste.
Yeah, there was that. So, okay, going to Casino Royale then, because that specifically is the thing I'm talking about. Him flipping in the car 87 times, and he gets out, and it's like, doesn't even have a limp. Like, there were some things we do with the James Bond character that I'm willing to accept an exciting, defying physics F9 style stunt. I'm not willing for you to sit there, and I know I said this with Casino Royale, for you to sit there and tell me this is supposed to be gritty realism. He's this close to an explosion, and it just pushes him back a smidgen. Like, come on. That's not how explosions work.
Well, for the record, I think Casino Royale was the last attempt that this iteration of Bond went for gritty realism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to call the aesthetic that they've gone with here, and I don't mean that to be like this is so bad, or like I genuinely don't have the proper categorization for it, because and this is not the only movie that this is true of. You get a lot of this with like Mission Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mission Impossible was always heavy on the crazy stunts.
A little bit, but there's a pretty clear delineation point in Mission Impossible after 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get to 4 and beyond, we've now left.
Right. That was when Tom Cruise started hanging off of trains, planes, and automobiles. And that was what those became known for.
Hang on, but the point there is, there are a series of movies, and this iteration of James Bond is one of them. The Bourne movies, I think, absolutely fall into this category after the first one. They try to blend realism with basically comic book superheroes.
Right, and I don't think it. I think there are some who do it better than others. I don't think the James Bond series of 5 movies did it well.
I agree with that, and I think my point is just I don't, again, I can't call this gritty realism. It way is not. Way is not. And,
it's not.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just a stylistic choice. But it's also not. It's not as utterly divorced from reality as the Fast and Furious series,
right?
Especially the last 3 entries.
Yeah, it doesn't fully commit to a aesthetic in that way, and maybe that's part of the issue I have with this. Like when we talked about F9, I like those movies because they fully embrace the stupid. I like the Marvel movies because they also embrace the stupid. The the problem I have with, I think, like the Warner Brothers DC movies is they couldn't figure out what they wanted to be either. So like you can do, I think you know, if you want to fully embrace like kind of like a Christopher Nolan Tenet kind of, you know, grit, like I don't think Tenet embraces stupid, or the Christopher Nolan. I think Nolan really does try to go for something that looks at least quasi-realistic, and he commits. So I don't mind it when he does.
Nolan's I think I've said this before. I think Nolan's genius is taking a single fantastical element
Mm-hmm.
and then making the rest of the world feel like it's a little bit like Stephen King,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stephen King goes out of his way to create a world that feels entirely real except for the supernatural horror element that's going on.
Right, but you believe that the supernatural horror element can happen in there.
Yeah.
Like, so like the dark, I swear to God, we'll talk about No Time to Die again. I promise, audience. But like the opening bank robbery scene in The Dark Knight,
mm-hmm.
like it's perfect. And whether or not you could get some expert to sort of, you know, examine it and go, well, no, here's what's wrong with these things. It comes off as looking as perfect as you're going to get on film. And so whatever all else happens in that movie, it never strays too far from the tone set by that first scene. That is the point. So like with James Bond movies, it's sometimes we're doing like really fun motorcycle chases, and like I love the I actually do enjoy that whole first opening sequence. Once getting past him getting blown up at Vespa's grave, which was like stupid. Once he's on the run and he's on the motorcycle, I think he grabs Madeline at the end of that sequence, and they're in the bulletproof car,
mm-hmm.
and you know, and it spins around and everything. My daughter had some really funny things to say about that. It was like, why didn't he just drive away? And I'm like, Lily, he was surrounded by people shooting guns at him. Like, he just should have driven. I'm like, he's not in a monster truck.
Yeah, like you can't. There's physical barriers here. He has to.
He was trying to get away. Like
he has to get these things. He has to get these things out of his way. Then once he does, he drives off. Like
it's like he didn't sit there. With like a machine gun and just start shooting everybody, because he had to kill every last one of them. Now all that stuff I liked. I know it's sort of of course you like Lashana Lynch in this. You're supposed to. Giving the woman credit, she's playing a character who now has to be the first person walking in the shoes of James Bond. And all that goes with that. The pressure that goes with it, the anxiety, the feeling the need to prove yourself. And then he comes back in the room and she can't even have that to herself. Now she has to literally stand next to the guy and be as good or better than he is. You know, there's a great little sequence. It's very subtle. It's one of the things that the movie does do well, where something along the lines of like, double O what? Double O what?
They reinstate James Bond as a 00.
Mm-hmm.
And she immediately goes 00 what? Like he's gonna take her. Like she is.
And no one in the room's listening to her.
She is Triple H. Like someone's gonna take her spot. And she must keep everyone else away from her spot.
Well, it's one of those. And like, how do you? So you're doing a modest production and you have some fairly unknown actors, but then Robert De Niro walks in the room and says, well, I want to be in this too. And you're like, how do you say no to Robert De Niro? And but you're the lead in this thing. And like, are they going to give my part to De Niro? And who could stop them if they wanted to? But I want my part, and like she's the realest character in this entire movie with the only one that has a personality I related to.
Yeah, I'm with you in that respect. There's that bit where she goes 00 what, and then everyone ignores her because they all, because this needs to be preferenced. They're not ignoring her because she sucks.
Mm-hmm.
They're ignoring her because the issue at hand is world-altering bioweapons.
Right.
And you care about your designation?
What a human thing that is, though. It's like, I understand the world is going to end, but I don't shit on me.
As though anyone was. I mean, that character. I mentioned this a little bit briefly. I want to get into a little bit more detail here. She's written as being unpleasant.
Yeah.
And I want to get.
But hang on.
Well, let me.
Shrill.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out because you say unpleasant and everyone goes Ghostbusters 2016. No. Not like that. Not an asshole, not shrill, not Elizabeth Banks' Charlie Angels. She's actually a well-developed character, but their character traits are on the negative side. Go.
Yeah. And there's a world of difference there.
Mm-hmm.
She's not screeching.
Right.
Like when she's walking James Bond when he's a visitor through the area and someone else and people are walking by going, 007, and she looks at him and goes, "Boy, that must annoy you." And he could not possibly care less.
Right.
But she's a little bit paranoid again about her. I hate to use the pro wrestling term. She's paranoid about her spot.
Right.
Like, I gotta close the show. I have to pose, brother. This is how it ends.
I was gonna say it's a very much Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior thing where, but in this iteration she's kind of Hulk Hogan. It's just like I'll let you be here for a little while, but eventually we're gonna, as Gavin once said, get things back to where they need to be. Very much concerned with, well, I'm not gonna have you let you have too much of the spotlight. Meanwhile, as you said, there's James Bond going, I was happy in Jamaica. I didn't want any of this.
Yeah, really. I was. You went out of your way to find me.
Right.
And now you're trying to wheedle at me about being like, no. And again, he doesn't care. And then,
right.
When he throws it back at her, it's great because at that, if he does that to her apropos of nothing, then he's the jerk.
Right.
When she's kind of been, pushing him a little bit and he just kind of shows appropriate backbone.
Mm-hmm.
That's appreciated. And
there's a lot of calm the fuck down with him.
I wanted to praise the writing of her character in the sense that this is how you can write a character that's meant to be a little unpleasant.
Yeah.
But is still an engaging character. Like she's competent, but not overbearing. And this has been true of James Bond for the best Bond stories. Bond is hyper competent in certain areas, but there's other things that he just can't do very well. And some of the better Bond stories are when he has to navigate that space and how he gets around it.
Yeah.
So having her be here, and she's good at her job. She's a valuable character to have, and she's interesting to follow, but she's also kind of unpleasant to be around. And writing a character like that, striking that balance, takes some effort, and I do think that deserves a tremendous amount of praise.
I want to talk briefly about something. I was listening to the critically acclaimed guys talk about this today, and I'm not going to get into their whole review, but one of them said something that I actually thought was dead on and definitely something that gave me pause. In 5 James Bond movies, 2 of them are him still learning the job, and then in the third one, the floor beneath him crumbles, and then he's just falling for 3 movies. Till he gets blown up. And they made a point in saying we never got the chapter where he's Batman in the Dark Knight, to go back to that again. In Batman in the Dark Knight, he's been Batman for a few years now, and he's the best he's ever going to be at this job. And it's not until the very end of the movie where it all comes crashing down. But at least we got to see Batman at the height of his powers for an entire 2-hour movie. Yeah, we never get that with James Bond.
The closest we get is, I'm probably going to say the closest we get is Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
I would have said Skyfall, because I think, and for the record, I think Skyfall is probably the best of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly room for debate about that.
The world seems to agree with you.
Fair enough. I agree with them on occasion.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, Skyfall's opening bit is he gets shot off of a moving train, falls 300 feet into a river, and then we spend the next 20 minutes talking about how broken down he is physically.
Yeah. We never get to enjoy the chapter where James Bond is the best at his job and just out there on a mission. Yeah. And the mission is over and the movie ends, and he hasn't really progressed as a person, but that's okay. The guy Ian Fleming wrote millions of these books. There had to have been a fair number of them where he was just out there doing missions, and the mission's over, and he goes home and has a whiskey. I kind of, with this whole series, part of this review is not just a review of No Time to Die, but really a review of the whole the Daniel Craig James Bond series, and it's I lament the fact that we never got that. That it's always been either him trying to get his head around the job, or him trying to get away from the job. He never just does the job.
Yeah, getting to this movie in particular, I have a few other things that we can kind of relate to the rest of them, to the rest of these movies. Let me start with the big one, I think, that has dogged the entire Daniel Craig as James Bond experience. The entire set of marching orders for the casting for all the James Bond villains in this series seems to have gone as follows. Hire really good actors. Like, really good actors. In 2 cases, Academy Award-winning actors. 3? I think Malek might have won one. I have to double check. But hire these exceptionally talented people, and then give them nothing to do. Like, you hire Mads Mikkelsen, and he's probably the second best of the James Bond villains that come out of this group. And because he actually gets to be a character for a little bit. Like, we actually follow what he does in places that do not involve James Bond being in the room with him.
Mm-hmm.
But then I almost don't want to talk about Quantum of Solace, not because it's a terrible movie, but because that movie was so badly affected by the writer's strike that it just can't compare for reasons that aren't really its fault. They had a shooting schedule, and when the writers went on strike, they had some of it written, and some of it fleshed out, and some of it big empty spaces. And they just had to go with shooting what they had, and that damned the movie. And that's not anyone's fault as such.
Yeah.
There might have been other people that could have handled it better, but you're never really going to turn in greatness from that.
Right.
So I kind of want to set Quantum of Solace aside in that respect. Then, hey, Javier Bardem, who is awesome and is the best James Bond villain that's come out of this stretch. But that is saved more by the strength of his performance and the story they're trying to tell, rather than his character, rather than the writing necessarily being the strongest. It's not terrible there, but I'm 90% sure Bardem either improvised or brought his own ideas to the plate to help that along. Then we get to Spectre, and who do we hire? We hire Christoph Waltz, a 2-time Oscar winner, a genuinely phenomenal actor, and we waste him. Like, I don't know how. I don't understand. I still don't. How you cast Christoph Waltz as Blofeld and get that result. It doesn't compute. Like, what happened here? And then we get to this, and we hire Rami Malek, another good actor, and we put burn makeup over half of his face, which is fine. Like, I don't actually object to that. But we basically tell him to do half of his Mr. Robot voice. So everything's kind of right here, and I talk like this, and I don't really do anything, and we give him stupid flowery prose, and for some reason he's adopted a Japanese aesthetic that's never actually explained. I want to wear a traditional Japanese, I forget what a male kimono, but I want to wear that for the final sequence. Sure, like, this is never, like, why? You're not Japanese. Your character's Russian. What's going on here? And it's a giant weakness of, like, the weak Bond movies in particular for this group are weak in no small part because of how poor the villains are.
Yeah.
The villain is I'm going to rehash territory that Pat and I talked about. And if you haven't heard our lengthy discussion, there's a 2-part series of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy that are devoted entirely to James Bond movie villains. The first is everything before Pierce Brosnan. The second is Pierce Brosnan and then Daniel Craig up until Skyfall, if memory serves. And James Bond is, what do they call it? oh yeah, there's a subtype of character, right? Like when you're talking about what kind of role a character fulfills. There's a group of characters called iconic characters. These are characters that don't actually have arcs, right? They exist, and the interest in the medium, be this books or movies or whatever, is watching them do the thing they do. Like Sherlock Holmes does not have an arc. He's Sherlock Holmes at the beginning of a movie or a book, in the middle, and at the end. He's Sherlock Holmes. That doesn't change. He doesn't have a character arc. He doesn't have a whole lot of character growth. He's just Sherlock Holmes. And we watch those movies and read those books to watch him, or watch the television shows to watch him do Sherlock Holmes things. That is the thrust of the appeal. James Bond is another one of these. The challenge with writing an iconic character like that is you need to then give them an appropriate foil to play off of to make everything work. Because if taken purely as what the character does, there's interest. It's not like it's necessarily uninteresting, but it really lacks a kind of sizzle. Like there's nothing extra there. There's no spark. And James Bond needs a good villain to be opposite. And when he got decent villains in these movies, it worked. Casino Royale is a perfectly fine movie. He and Mads Mikkelsen play off of each other very, very well. My issues with some of the technicalities in the poker setting notwithstanding, the acting between the two of them is great. When he gets to be opposite Javier Bardem, it's great. When he beats up the tiny French scientist for 20 minutes in Quantum of Solace, falls a little bit flat. When you utterly waste Christoph Waltz as Blofeld, it falls flat. And here, when he's talking to Rami Malek as Malek is menacing his daughter, not daughter, like, there's nothing. These two characters have never shared a single scene.
Yeah.
And now they're supposed to engage in dialogue like this matters?
Shouldn't this have ended with like him and Blofeld falling into Mount Doom? Just Blofeld biting off his finger and they both go over the falls. Like, that's the thing. They were like, we're gonna have this really epic ending, the glorious conclusion to the James Bond saga with a villain we're only meeting for the first time and was more interested in Madeline than he ever was in James Bond. That is my biggest issue with Rami Malek, because
it's a real problem.
His performance in this is understated, but I don't mind understated. I don't need everybody to be Skeletor or Mumra. But on the other hand,
some motivation would have been nice.
Again, this got brought up in critically acclaimed. I'm just gonna repeat it here. It was like his whole thing was that Madeline's father had killed people.
I get his beef with Spectre.
That's what I'm getting at. But he accomplished the mission.
Yeah.
That was
pretty early.
There was nothing else for him to do. And so it was like, I understand what sets James Bond in his path is he's got a biological weapon, go get it and stop him from using it. There's a film frame missing here. But why does he want to destroy the world?
Yeah, that second part is his beef with Spectre's fine. And then it's the entire setup to the finale where it's like, well, he accomplished his mission, but oh no, he wants to destroy the world too. Okay.
But it's like a trope that happens in a lot of these kinds of movies is we want the biological weapon because we want to sell it to the highest bidder and make we want to make all the monies. Okay. He's not doing that. He wants to destroy the world because
he is selling it at the end, but it's very badly explained and set up.
Yeah, again, they didn't seem to know what they wanted to do. Or I'm going to destroy the world because revenge for whatever the reasons are. Environmental reasons, I was abused reasons, whatever the reasons are. This is my way of getting back at a world that wronged me. Or it's a Thanos kind of a thing. This is my way of correcting what I feel to be a natural wrong in the universe. None of those things are present. He's just like, I'm going to blow up the world. But for why? Because I'm the villain of this movie. That's why. And I have nothing else to do. And so you have this. It is a wonder they were able to pull off anything at all with this, because like the final fight between them, again, it's not, it's not Optimus Prime Megatron or anything like that. It's actually quite the opposite. But I kind of like that as an aesthetic choice. Like, why does everything have to be the most biggest, most megarous, most Rocky Apollo fight ever?
I'm like, okay with it.
Two old men, kind of. It almost feels like what's his Mr. Hubert or whatever from Family Guy when he's fighting with the German guy, and it's like two old men fighting, and it's like the most slowest fighting ever. I was like kind of okay with that, given what was happening here. The problem is just as an example, the fight between Rocky and Apollo, there's an emotional investment. It's not just two guys punching each other in the head. There's a whole thing getting involved with the two of these people that have pit them against one another. When you don't have that, you just have the Avengers fighting endless Ultron bots, where there's no investment other than you just kind of want to see the Avengers win. I mean, and you could argue that, well, if they lose, the world gets destroyed. But when Thor hits an Ultron bot with a hammer, there's no emotional investment for you as the viewer. It's just a mindless, faceless zombie.
Well, as has been endlessly pointed out, it's not an Avengers movie until they fight a giant army of faceless drones.
So now imagine, again, no emotional investment in these characters in opposition to one another, but yet we're going to spend a good 10 minutes on this with them fighting. And while the fighting itself is artfully done, there's nothing else to it.
Yeah,
and I just wanted it to be over.
And God, Rami Malek never shuts up. Like, after
not only does he not show up, but it's all mumble whisper.
Like, how does he infects James with these specific bunch of nanobots that are coded for Madeline and by extension her child, and then he spends like 3 minutes talking about how he had just accomplished the most fiendish plot that ever fiended, and now you are afflicted with the kiss of death. Never again will you be able to touch the ones you love. I got to a certain point when I went, just shoot him. And then like 10, 15, 20 seconds keep going. And I'm like, why aren't you shooting him? Right. Why are you letting him talk? Writer of this particular movie who just felt way too in love with their own purple prose. Shame on you.
Because we felt like we had to, is the point that I made an hour ago. And that's this whole movie. Why is this in the movie? Because it has to be. It's the end of the James Bond, Daniel Craig era. And like over and over and over again.
This movie is what happens when your movie is constructed via checklist.
Yeah.
Like, you must do... Well, this doesn't leave a whole lot of room for... And nope, you must do all of these.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I'd like to tell a slightly different story, and I'd like to tweak this, and nope, you got to do all of these. I mean, it's what people are really complaining about when they complain about the Marvel formula.
Yeah.
Now, I think to the credit of the Marvel formula, I think there is enough flexibility within it to let them do variations.
Aesthetically, yes. There are style and aesthetic things that happen in a Marvel movie that are the director's own.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the Faustian bargain you make when you make one of these. It's like, okay, I'd like to make a Chinese fantasy kung fu picture. Okay, these are the things that need to be in this and the non-negotiable. I don't give a shit what else you do. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna go make Shang-Chi now.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in this instance, they were given a list of things that they had to do that was just a mile long.
Well, that's the thing, that this, there's been some praise given to the director of this thing, who is Cary Joji Fukunaga. And like, I don't get a sense of style or aesthetics from this. This just feels like you said, kind of a cut and paste blah James Bond movie. But then they were like, it was like they had a script meeting, and they were like, let's talk about what happens in some other glorious conclusions to film franchises. Take those ideas and write them on a whiteboard. And then
how did this? Okay, I have to bring this. How did this guy get this job?
So you have you have key phrases and words on a whiteboard that represent any number of glorious conclusions. And like, okay, this movie has to be this list of James Bond stuff that everyone likes, and then this list of glorious conclusion stuff that we've seen work everywhere else. Do that. And this doesn't feel like there was any kind of love in this movie. It doesn't feel like there was any kind of style, a point of view. I mean, I know somewhere out there are the people of the world going, but why does it have to have any of those things? That's fine, but then I don't need a 3-hour B movie either. Like, fucking pick one. If your movie has no point of view, no style, and no aesthetics, and it's just a checklist of shit happening, cut this in fucking half. It didn't need to be 2 hours. 90 minutes would have done it.
Okay, I figured out how he got this job. Okay.
How did he get? Wait, hang on. Did you anything about what I just said?
No, I agree entirely.
Okay, go ahead.
I was looking at his filmography, and in 2009 he directed Sin Nombre, which is it's not bad, but it's it kind of is what it is in that respect. In 2011 he directed a Jane Eyre adaptation, which went largely unremarked. And then in 2015 he directed Beasts of No Nation, which I have seen.
Okay. Oh, he directed it.
No, he wrote it.
Oh, yeah. You are correct. Let me read the chart correctly.
But that was the last feature film he did, was Beast of No Nation, which is, in some respects, a very good movie. But I don't know that I would look at the guy who directed that and went, I need this guy for James Bond.
Right.
I think he got this more on the back of first writing the first part of it, and then his television work, where he was the director of the first season of True Detective, which is remarkable television. But if you look at what he's done since, I mean, it's
meh.
There's nothing here that like when Sam Mendes was hired to direct one of these, or oh God, who was the other one?
All right.
I can't, but it didn't. It's a bit of an odd choice to have this guy direct this movie, and I think unfortunately part of it might have been a bit of a prestige thing for him. So he was happy to do the checklist because there's not a tremendous amount that speaks to his personal style in some respects.
I don't say this to start a tangential argument because I really want to move on to the money. And I don't say this to tweak your nipples as much as I enjoy doing that. It's one of the things that brings me great joy in this world. But but at least when Taika Waititi directs a movie, his Taika Waititi-ness is all over that movie. Whether it was just Ragnarok being the most obvious choice to talk about, like that was very distinctly Taika Waititi. It had a point of view, it had a style, it had an aesthetic. It was very much his vision with the Marvel checklist. And I think for that, I give I would give it more emphasis and credit over No Time to Die, which again just feels like, if you enjoyed the action sequences, this is the last thing I wanted to talk about, actually, just kind of dovetailing back into the first thing we talked about. Like, if you like the collection of action sequences in this, and you liked to see a hero defeat a villain, I'm not going to take that away from you, but I feel like a James Bond movie should be a little bit more than your average popcorn video store shelf action movie, especially when you're ending the series with this character. The last thing, and then we'll get out of here. We'll move on to the next segment. So the whole third act of this thing, besides the fight with Rami Malek, is James Bond walking around with a rifle shooting people. And as I said to you at the top of this thing, and as I said to you when we talked about it before Midnight Mass, I'm not interested in seeing James Bond do Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando. I'm not interested in Daniel Craig doing what Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Jason Statham and so many other, Vin Diesel, The Rock, Idris Elba, for fuck's sake. I'm more interested in seeing them do those. John Cena. I'm more interested in seeing those people do those things.
I don't think you can't even say John Cena does stuff like this, that comedic hack.
Fine. But I would much rather see those guys do those things than, you know, old man Daniel Craig. It just like, again, it just felt forced. It felt like, well, we have to. What else are we going to do with this guy? And that whole third act just utterly lost me. All I wanted this movie to be was over. And not just because it was 3 hours, but because the whole third act was flat and disinteresting to me. I'll give you the final word and we'll move on.
I think you're correct. I think the third act in this is a real problem because they try to escalate the stakes to a ridiculous level for reasons that are not clear, either internally or like I imagine the only external reason was they were given a note. Because this character has no reason to do this. And there's nothing about the final infiltration and action sequence that says James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not opposed to James Bond doing gunplay like this. I'm really not. But it still needs to be set up properly. It still needs to, and I don't think this is, and I think that's a problem. Here's I think a thing that I was struck with as I was watching this movie. If you've never heard this bit from Steven Spielberg, I think, and Spielberg very much wants to direct a James Bond movie, and I kind of hope they let him, just for my own curiosity.
If they do, I want him to be riding a motorcycle, and it goes so high, you see the silhouette in the moon, and then it comes back down again.
Yes, you would want that. I don't know why you would want that, but you would.
Because I'm a silly human being, that's why.
Yeah. But he did, if you've ever heard him talk about if you've ever heard him talk about the Temple of Doom, his premise, like the preface to him talking about this and some of the stuff I've seen is the original script for Raiders of the Lost Ark was too big. If you don't quite know what I mean by that, it goes the following. The original script for Raiders of the Lost Ark actually included, in addition to everything we saw, a scene where they raft down river rapids, a scene where they do the minecart chase, and what was the other one? Might have been the bridge. There might have been there's one other action sequence that was originally in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Spielberg looked at that and went, "This is too big." He looked at the script and this is not about length. This is about what are we trying to do, and how can we accomplish this in the best way? And you can't put that much into a movie. Everything then falls apart. Nothing feels like it's supposed to. So they cut a few of those, and they lifted the ideas of those sequences and put them in Temple of Doom, where they work much better. I don't think there was any bit of reflection about that when it came to this script, because this has a bit where James Bond is chased by cars on foot, then where there's a car chase, then there's a shootout and a car chase and an escape from a sinking boat, and then it goes to, and then there's a tense scene between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter, because that's all that sequence is. Every writer, I remember where I heard this actually. So I heard someone mention this. Every writer at some point in their career does some variation of Will Graham talking with Hannibal Lecter. That's what we got. And then there's that. And then there's another car chase sequence that dovetails into a shootout going through the woods. And then there's a big dive sequence out of an airplane, and an infiltration sequence, and a gunfight, and a fight over a pit of acid. And then there's a one-shot take sequence of James Bond fighting upstairs with rifles and pistols and hand-to-hand combat, and he blows up a guy's eye with his EMP watch. And at no point did someone look at this and go, there's a bit too much here.
Maybe let's not do all the things.
Maybe we should trim back a few, just a thought.
Right.
Like that clearly never entered into the equation.
Real quick, there's a YouTube. I don't watch his YouTube videos anymore. It was I think Everything Awesome, and like at one point he kept doing. I've heard leaks of the Avengers Endgame script, and it was like everything was Kang, the Living Tribunal, like everybody was showing up in Endgame. It was the entire Jack Kirby Marvel pantheon of celestial characters where it's going to show up in Endgame. We didn't get that
yet.
Yet. But but let us assume he's not a completely lying hack, and that maybe that was a consideration. At some point, the Russos had to say, maybe we don't need the Living Tribunal in the story that we're telling. How many new characters you want to introduce in this mess?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is yes. On the positive side of this movie, I think all of the action sequences, sort of independent of their issues in as far as the larger film, they're all shot competently. They're all followable. They're mostly engaging, and that certainly deserves some credit. Daniel Craig is still a great James Bond. Ray Fiennes does a great job in the M role. If you were going to get rid of Dame Judi Dench, and much as I think that was a interesting decision, for want of a better phrase, he does a very good job in that particular role. I said this before, I think the sequence where Bond interrogates Blofeld does a better job of making Blofeld seem like a big deal than the entire Spectre movie did.
Mm-hmm.
I think, much as I think that Blofeld having a bionic eye and somehow running a literal worldwide counterintelligence agency terrorist organization while trapped in a deeply secure facility that's the dumbest thing. And much as I think the entire nanobot thing is just the dumbest. Believe it or not, when they introduced his watch this time, the gimmick for his watch was going to be a low-level EMP, my genuine thought was, oh, he's going to be infected with nanobots and use that to disarm them. Because that makes sense.
Right.
And apparently the pitch meeting guy agreed with me. He's like, oh, he's been infected with these nanobots. Oh, so he can use his EMP watch to disable them. No, they're nanobots. Well, isn't that? No. Nanobots are a thing that I can put in the script and they can do whatever I want them to do.
Right, and they never run out of a charge. You can't blow them up using electricity, with an EMP.
Hope you don't need an MRI.
Yeah, it's just magic. They're magical.
It's why I hate. It is why I. Those are. There's a handful of like technobabble terms that are giant red flags for me, because it means you as the writer are being lazy. And you want to do what you want to do when you want to do it with no thought about what it means beyond, I want to do this right now. And it's sad and annoying and very, very stupid. And the last thing...
Before you do, there's actually one other complaint I want to make, but it's very specific.
I have a very specific praise thing I want to do, and it will tee you up just as well.
No, it won't. So right. I used to really, really love the James Bond songs. I was actually... trying to get my kids to maybe semi-interested in the James Bond movies. I was actually playing a record of a collection of the James Bond ones, and like the Garbage one, The World Is Not Enough, and I think that Madonna has done one, and there's a whole bunch I really, really love, and I've actually enjoyed quite a number of them in this iteration of Bond too. I hated the Billie Eilish version. Oh my God, the one in this movie sucks so bad. But if you disagree with me and you want to hear it for yourself,
hang on. Because let me dovetail this, because it's going to help you plug this.
Okay, sure.
Much as I'm with you, I did not care for this James Bond song almost at all.
Mm-hmm.
I rather enjoyed Writing on the Wall from Spectre. I knew what was going to happen as soon as I heard that song. I'm going to hear covers of this that I like better than this version, and I did.
Oh yeah, the Chris Cornell one is good too.
I don't dislike Adele's.
Mm.
But setting aside Billie Eilish, they got Hans Zimmer to do the music for this one,
Mhm.
and you can't go wrong with Hans Zimmer scoring your film. Like, you just can't.
This is what you meant by teeing me up. Okay.
Yeah, because I love not the Billie Eilish song, but I love the score for this movie. He riffs on the James Bond theme well. He does a great job building tension with music when he's supposed to. Like, Hans Zimmer is the man.
Yeah. And if you want to listen to the Hans Zimmer score, I wouldn't listen to the Billie Eilish song. It sucks. But if you want to listen to Chris Cornell or Madonna or Garbage, any one of the people who have done these great James Bond theme songs over the years, they're all collected for you. They're all available on AmazonMusic.com.
Get out of here.
They're all available on AmazonMusic.com.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mute myself. That's my mistake. I'm shooing my dog away from something. My apologies.
/W2M Network. We're giving away a free 30-day trial of the Amazon Music Unlimited service. So go ahead and click the link in the description of this podcast. Fill out the information. You'll get your free 30 days. You can download all the James Bond music you want. And then when you're done with that, when your 30 days are up, if you like the service, and why wouldn't you? Because it's, free music. You keep it. You pay the monthly service fee like you would with Spotify or Pandora or Apple Music. But if you don't, and you do want to get rid of it, you can just cancel the service. No fuss, no muss, no contracts, no nothing like that. And with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the money.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money,
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
All right. So this thing had a budget of like $300 million. It says 250 to 300, but considering this thing has been delayed since 1985, and
I'm with you. Let's err on the high side.
Yeah, the 300, and I think that's modest. It's currently made.
That's probably 300 before marketing.
Yeah. But this is what it says on the Wikipedia page. So that's what we're going with. $301 million budget at the box office at the time of this recording, which is a Tuesday night. It's made worldwide $321 million. That's not what it made in its opening weekend. It had opened all over the world prior to it opening in the United States this past weekend. It actually came in under projections for the weekend. They were thinking with Venom and how well that did that it would come in at about, I think I read like 80 or 90 million, and it did not. It came in at about 55 million, I think, for the weekend. I'm looking at the domestic 2021.
You could share the screen for Box Office Mojo, and we could all look at that.
Oh, fuck me. I'm really off my game tonight, man.
Yeah. Look, that's why I'm here. I am here to prop up. I'm here to help prop you up. I will carry you when you need to be carried.
Oh, I appreciate you paying attention to me and telling me that, hey, I'm not doing the thing I'm supposed to do, because some people don't do that. So I appreciate you telling me, and I appreciate you, Robert Winfree. Moving on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Domestic 2021 weekend, October 8th through the 11th of 2021, including Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, apparently.
Columbus Day. Look.
No.
Hang on. I'm not going to get into a deep thing. I'm perfectly willing to praise Columbus for the things that he deserves to be praised for, as well as say he was a bit of a genocidal madman in certain parts of his life. We can discuss the nuance of humanity a little bit, can't we? Not everyone is all villain or all hero.
No Time to Die seems to have grossed about 62 million for the weekend, and it was the number one movie in the United States. Venom fell from. Am I looking at the right chart? Hang on.
Yeah, 8th through the 11th. So
no,
yeah.
I there we go. Now I'm in the right place. All right.
No,
nope.
That's last week.
God damn it. Hang on. Why is this not the okay? It feels like the website's different than it used to be. Why am I struggling?
It's cold and there are wolves after you.
Maybe.
And click the 8th to the 11th one, and I think that's what it'll be.
That's where I was, but it normally tells you where the movie was the weekend before, and that part of it's not there, and that's what I'm struggling with.
They might not have updated.
Anyway, Venom Let There Be Carnage was number 2 for the weekend.
Hey, before we go too deep into that, No Time to Die underperformed a little bit. Venom 2 suffered a 65% or so drop.
Something like that, yeah.
Now, under other circumstances, that wouldn't necessarily be all that bad. But I feel like they were really hoping for a hold of closer to like 55 as opposed to 65. That was
There we go. Now I'm in the right place.
Yeah, right about 65%. Yeah, that's
okay. You know what it was? I was looking at the 4-day weekend, not the 3-day weekend.
So they were waiting to count today then. Okay.
So starting again, No Time to Die debuted at number 1 for the weekend and had a $55 million gross for the traditional Friday to Sunday weekend. Whew! Venom. Wasn't me. I was on the wrong page.
Yeah.
Venom fell from 1 to 2. Yeah, and had almost a 65% drop. It's right there on the screen.
Again, that's not great, but it could also be worse.
Addams Family 2, which was PVOD and in theaters, fell from 2 to 3 and had a 41% drop. Shang-Chi dropped from 3 to 4 and had only a 30% drop. But this is the 6th week in the theater.
Shang-Chi at this point is, it's done. And I don't mean that to say like it's crap or it's done making money, but it's going to hang around by virtue for a little bit, just kind of by virtue of other stuff still coming out and other things dropping and it maybe having a modest hold. But at this point, it's basically made all its money.
The Many Saints of Newark dropped from 4 to 5. It had a 70% drop. Yeah, no one. You know what's funny? Good. The irony of The Many Saints of Newark is that apparently HBO Max had like a record viewing of The Sopranos. So people are perfectly willing to watch The Sopranos. Nobody give a shit about this movie.
No. It's not only that. The Many Saints of Newark as its own thing broke streaming records for HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people watched the crap out. Like, I don't know how much they
on HBO Max.
Yeah. And it did in fact drive a resurgence of people to use HBO Max to rewatch The Sopranos. So.
Yeah,
you're getting people to spend more time on like it's an odd little thing, but if apart from just subscription numbers, if you want to try and measure how much success a streaming service is having, one of the primary ways you do it is by measuring time spent on your website.
Right.
And I think the reality is if Many Saints of Newark drives a renewed interest in rewatching The Sopranos, it'll still be considered a success, even though the movie in and of itself is not going to do great numbers financially.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, if the way that they're measuring success Warner Brothers is for the year is not just how it does in theaters. They know they're going to get a depressed financial gain in theaters right now, not just because of the state of the market and the pandemic, but also because they're day and date on their subscription without a premium fee. So their other way of measuring and finding success is whether or not this drives traffic to HBO Max. And so that's a really good
Netflix does the same thing.
Right. No, I understand that. Well, the difference being, though, is that Warner Brothers said this was a nice thing to do for this year, and I think it was necessary to do this year, and we're never going and let us never speak of the shortcut again. They have said they are exclusively theatrical next year. I'll be curious to see what Universal does, because Universal is taking more of a Disney approach, which is basically, we'll see, movie to movie. We have no idea what's happening in this world. So maybe a Halloween goes on Peacock, maybe it doesn't. We couldn't tell you.
Universal has no plans.
Man, crazy. Universal crazy has no plan.
Seriously, they threw in the towel on 2020. Pretty much. They pushed a bunch of their stuff to 2021, and we're like, well, we're gonna have to release.
Are you talking about Paramount or Universal?
I don't know either.
Because Paramount's the one that gave up on 2020. Universal.
Paramount also gave up on 2021 when they went, wait, you mean we'd have to be releasing Maverick and then Mission Impossible within weeks of each other, and Tom Cruise is fighting Tom Cruise in the box office brawl, and oh crap, this is terrible. How about we just look at next year?
Yeah. Just real quick about Halloween Kills, which is day and date this weekend on Peacock. And as much as that decision annoyed the shit out of me, Jason Blum came out and said, "Yeah, that hasn't all to do with I messed up the distribution model for Halloween 2018, and I didn't want to do it this time, so I made sure it was available to anyone that wanted to see it by putting it on Peacock." And I went, "So you're a professional in Hollywood, you say? Okay."
Hang on. To be fair to Jason Blum, the issue that surrounded Halloween 2018 was they took forever and a freaking day to make that not a joke. Like that thing's, I think that became available digitally after it was available physically. I'd have to double check that, but like that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. He came into this one very much like, okay, we need a distributor for the digital after theatrical, like we need this to be set up beforehand. We don't want to be struggling to find someone to host this digitally and lose any chance we might have at monetizing it in that respect.
Right.
So it's just a little bit of a learning curve. And I mean, come on, how many people have really figured this out yet?
Free Guy in its 9th week stayed at number 6 for the weekend. Dear Evan Hansen. Oh, Evan Hansen.
Do it. Do it.
Do what?
It's a look at how it's crashing, Mark. Look at how it's crashing.
Yeah, Dear Evan. Well, can I get there? Dear Evan Hansen in only 3 weeks in the theater. Again, poor Universal. This fucking something that should have been fucking day and date. Fell from 5 to 7 and grossed only $1 million. Is grossed $1 million for the weekend. Yeah, so Dear Evan Hansen.
Total. Look at its total gross. It's 13 million.
Oh yeah. How about that?
God.
What was the budget on that? Hey, look up the budget while I continue this.
Yeah, let me have a look at that.
Lamb, which I actually heard the critical acclaim guys review today, apparently not as good as I wanted it to be. That debuted at number 8.
Budget for Dear Evan Hansen, 27 to 28 million.
Ugh.
How did you spend $28 million on that?
Oh, Candyman in its 7th week. This was actually a pretty big hit for Universal. Fell from 7 to 9. A Fathom event featuring an opera debuted at number 10. Jungle Cruise 8 to 11. Titan, where a girl gets pregnant by a car.
Sues for paternity.
11 to 12. Paw Patrol day and date on Paramount Plus is 13. Stayed that way for 2 weeks in a row. The Jesus Music 10 to 14. Cry Macho 12 to 15. After We Fell apparently opened up in a whole bunch of new theaters apparently. So that jumped from 23 to 16.
Looks like it opened in another 100 or so locations.
Don't Breathe 15 to 17. Malignant 14 to 18. Speaking of things that bombed.
I think Malignant, like others, they're going to be looking more at the traffic that it did for HBO.
Yeah.
And everyone and I think we mentioned this before, it's kind of a shame because if that's theatrical exclusive, I mean, you're not breaking the bank with Malignant, but you've got a pretty solid hit.
I'm Your Man opened up in more theaters, so that jumped from 21 to 19. Cop Shop dropped by half from 17 to 20. The Eyes of Tammy Faye dropped from 16 to 21.
Oof.
And then finally,
that's a prestige picture. You released that to try and get awards.
Sure.
And I'm sure, Mark, when you fill out your ballot for the Oscars.
Mass debuted at number 26, and that's from Bleecker Street. And then Golden Voices for Music Box debuted at number 33 and made less than $7,000. Yikes. Worldwide, let's see where we stand. Probably
nothing's changed. Hey, look, nothing's changed.
No, fuck off. Look at what's changed. The Battle of Lake Changjin jumped up.
Oh, hello.
It knocked Godzilla versus. Wow, what a sexy voice you have, sir. Hello. It knocked Godzilla versus Kong out of the top 4. Ha ha. The 3 out of the 4.
Hang on. A moment of silence, please.
Yes.
For the following reality. Shang-Chi might not make more than Godzilla versus Kong. I mean, look, it still might beat it. This is not me declaring, but as has been mentioned, this month is stacked. Shang-Chi's pretty much had its theatrical run. And it's, what, $60 million or so still behind Godzilla versus Kong.
Yep.
Let me be clear.
For the rest of the year, like, it gets to December before there's even like a halfway decent break in big hit movies. And then you're into literally all within a 2-week period. Spider-Man, The Kingsman, The Matrix, Sing, and if you're into this sort of thing, I know we're going to review it. Another Guillermo del Toro movie.
And again, I am not calling Shang-Chi a bomb. It is most certainly not. It is a giant success by any appreciable metric. But Godzilla vs. Kong substantially underperformed. And there's a non-trivial chance Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings does not surpass it at the worldwide box office.
Well, if you look at the difference in Shang-Chi between domestic gross and foreign, compare that with F9. Okay, let's do an apples to apples comparison. 2 movies meant for worldwide distribution, meant to be appreciated by the Asian market, and look at like the difference between the two. So hardly anyone goes to see in America F9, but the rest of the world
I can tell you exactly the difference between F9 and Shang-Chi.
But for the people at home not looking at the chart, give me a second. And then you have 189 foreign, which is basically like nobody in the rest of the world gave a shit. But in America, it makes 213. Like if you just look at the domestic chart on this thing,
it's probably, I think it's the number 1 domestic for the, you got to click the arrow if you want to see the domestic stuff.
I don't got to do nothing but stay black and die, first of all. Yeah. Shang-Chi's at the top. My God, if you look at domestic, it's Shang-Chi, Black Widow, F9, Quiet Place, Venom, Free Guy, Jungle Cruise, and then Godzilla before you're less than 100 million.
The domestic box office for 2021 is, I'd have to double check this, and I want to wait until the end of the year to be sure. It's not that much different than 2020 if we're looking at like raw numbers.
Here, there it is. 2020. Bad Boys at 206. I mean, better. It's better than 2020.
It's better, but
not by a lot.
Like, I mean, especially if you want hilarity, look at 2019, where hang on, I only mean it in the following.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you track the box office returns leading up to 2019, they go. Actually, they go up. Actually, sorry, this way. We have the slope. It goes up, and then we get to 2019, and then 2020's way down here. It drops like a rock.
Right, but I mean, theaters didn't operate for 3 to 6 months.
And I think the point there is 2021 hasn't quite rebounded as strong as a lot of people want you to believe. It's not as bad, but
it was starting to do okay. And then we had the Delta variant resurgence and people not wanting to mask and not wanting to get vaccines. And oh boy, COVID went up and nobody wants to go out anymore. I mean, it happens. So anyway,
it does, and it'll probably happen again next year.
I think it'll be a little bit better, but
it'll look. It's going to keep ticking up,
right?
But we're going to have 18 variants next year as well that come out and have people freaking out and get your umpteenth booster shot and
anyway,
tell me I'm wrong, and look, get vaccinated, people.
All right.
I'm not here saying
Before we get kicked off of YouTube for doing stuff like that, Jason.
Hey, I'm saying get vaccinated.
Who knows what this week they'll be kicking people over YouTube for?
That's fair. The YouTube is a dark and scary place full of monsters.
Speaking of monsters, as I was saying, the Battle of Lake Changi has just skyrocketed up the chart here to number 4, knocking Godzilla down to 5. Shang-Chi comes in at number 6, which overtook Black Widow. which is a fair achievement considering Black Widow was day and date with Premiere Access. Free Guy at number 8.
High hitting at number 9.
Yeah, coming in at number 9, and then A Quiet Place Part 2 at 10. So A Quiet Place Part 2 is going to get knocked out by Eternals when that hits. And I think here's the thing. There were at least 4 movies that I think break the top 10 by the end of the year.
I'm curious
one of them is Eternals. I think Eternals cracks into the top 10, and I'm not going to say how high it's going to go. I'm not going to get into that argument again.
I will tentatively agree with your assessment there. I mean, much as I want it to fall flat on its stupid face, I also live in the real world.
Eternals cracks the top 10. Ghostbusters cracks the top 10.
Ghostbusters probably does, yeah.
Spider-Man absolutely does.
You know what? I'm going to withhold judgment on Spider-Man only for the following reason. And only for the following reason. They're doing something very weird with that movie. And it's intentional. But if that weirdness is too weird, I don't expect it to. Let me be clear if we're talking about my own personal expectations. My expectations are that you are correct. I'm also going to allow for the possibility that the weirdness is just a bit too... This is the same kind of problem that the Eternals might run into, and that Marvel's going to have to be skirting around with a lot of these properties. You're starting to do the cosmic stuff. That means things are going to get weird. Weirder than usual, right?
Right.
Like, this is the territory we're getting into. You know, you joke about the Living Tribunal. We know the Celestials are going to be at play for the Eternals. So the Living Tribunal is not that far behind. We know you're getting the Fantastic Four back, so Galactus is probably going to show up at some point. Like, congratulations, we're in the weird territory, even for comics at this point. And that is going to bite them at some point. Will it be Spider-Man? My serious leaning is no. But we're also doing multiverse stuff, and I'm just not going to pretend that that's some kind of guarantor of success. I expect it, but are we increasing the probability that maybe this one doesn't? I think we are.
So my money, and I'm not, apparently, according to FanDuel, I'm not allowed to bet in Florida, but if I could, so Eternals, Ghostbusters, Spider-Man, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a bold statement that Matrix makes the top 10.
That is a bold statement in 2021.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hold on. I don't think you understand exactly how bold a statement that is.
I mean, on the one hand, working against it is its day and date on HBO Max. On the other hand, people seem to like the Matrix movies. I'm very excited for the trailer.
No. Portions of the internet are excited for the trailer. Let's not confuse the internet with reality.
Fair enough. All right, to move this along as we can get to the final part of this. This weekend, James Bond doesn't have a lot of stiff competition. It has a period drama from Disney/Fox in The Last Duel, and it's got Halloween Kills, which is day and date on Peacock with no premiere price tag. And then the following week is Dune, which again is the same problem, where it's day and date.
Dune,
apparently, it's killing out there, but on the other hand, people don't want to go to the movies all that much.
Hang on. I think working in Dune's favor is the following. Look, you don't need to see Halloween Kills on the big screen.
No, right? You do not, and I don't intend to.
Dune is a very cinematic movie by every...
I got my tickets for it already, and I have to go on a Thursday night at 7:00, despite it being a school night, because I'm taking my kids because I want to see it in IMAX.
So the fact that, again, some movies don't lose a whole lot by watching at home on your screen, some do, and I think Dune is going to be one of those movies that you want the theatrical experience to go along with the type of movie that it is.
So the only other movie in wide release is Ron's Gone Wrong, but your audience for Ron's Gone Wrong is not your audience for James Bond.
I don't even know what that is.
It's the last cartoon that was produced by 20th century animation. It might not, I don't think it was necessarily Blue Sky, but it was like some independent studio. It was being distributed by Fox, and then Fox got bought by Disney. So
that's not like that's not a selling point. Like I don't know what it is.
Oh, it's moving on. I'm not going to spend another 10 minutes trying to explain to you a movie we're not going to talk about.
Okay.
October 29th. The big one here is the new Edgar Wright drama / horror, Last Night in Soho.
Isn't that day and date?
Nope. It's
no?
It's a Focus feature.
Okay. Can I say this about Last Night in Soho? The first trailers were promising. Then I saw one with dialogue. And suddenly all my
Thomas
all
and
my
Mackenzie's
anticipation.
voice is really weird. But I like Anya Taylor-Joy. I liked what I saw in the trailer. I'm looking forward to talking about it with you and Ronnie. So we'll see what happens.
Antlers is that same weekend.
It is that same weekend. And that's Searchlight. But it's getting a wide release. Anyway, I can't imagine either one of those does a lot of money and or is real competitive with James Bond.
No, Bond doesn't. Bond doesn't have a tremendous, really big budget kind of
not until
opposition until Eternals, and by that point, Eternals is probably going to claim that weekend fairly handily.
Yeah. So yeah, Eternals, and then I thought, oh, that's right. They moved Ghostbusters to the 19th, and so the Eternals will have a 2-week run of nothing in its way. Though I want to talk to you. Real quick, I want to talk to you about this Belfast movie. Have you seen trailers for it yet?
No.
So
if
you can get it's not going to be something that you're going to see people talking about the trailer because it's not a Marvel movie. However, bear with me here. Apparently, there's a lot of chatter and buzz that this is going to be the picture at the Oscars. So it might be something you might want to take a look at. It might be something we might want to talk about at some point.
You know what I think of the Oscars?
Na 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 na. And on that note,
Mark, I forgot to tell you, since we're on Twitch, you can't do that.
Why?
Because there are sound bots that will DMCA you for using copyrighted music.
They can figure out what I just did. Have at it. And
you hummed a song that someone owns.
And then, I slapped myself, and so I changed the song in some way. I altered the song for purposes of parody. I now fall under fair use. See, and on that note,
are you ready? No, I said, are you?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
I remember to share my screen this time. All right.
Mark, who's sponsoring our look at the terrible critics that out there this week?
You're right. This entire next bit is brought to you by the good people at Grammarly. Thank you, Robert.
Grammarly. Like I said, I am happy to prop you up.
Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly helps corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M Network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M Network to download Grammarly for free. So the critics and the audience are about the same on this. It's got a Rotten Tomatoes score for the critics. It's got a critical score of 84. It's got an audience score of 88. The critics say it isn't the sleekest or most daring 007 adventure, but No Time to Die concludes Daniel Craig's franchise tenure in a satisfying style. And the audience says, no, it says it's very long and packed with plot. But No Time to Die says goodbye to Daniel Craig's Bond with all the action and excitement franchise fans expect. Fans expect apparently very little. Moving on.
Mark, don't make me say it.
Okay.
You just tried to bring up fan expectations in film.
You know, 5 hours ago, you said you weren't going to insult the audience. I just want to remind you of that.
I said, no. Look, guys, the following is not an insult. Some of you, and you know who you are, have fairly low expectations for film. And you know what? You might be perfectly happy with that. And I'm not here to say that you're a terrible person for having low expectations of film, but let's not pretend that you hold everything to the highest standard when you don't. Like, that's, you want to do so, fine. I'm not here to rain on your parade, but if we're gonna be honest about this, some of y'all spend a lot of time and money watching F9 or the Transformers movies. Yeah, their expectations, Mark, they're low.
Abby Bernstein, not Leonard Bernstein, of Assignment X. It's sometimes thrilling, but even when it isn't, it satisfies. A 45-degree day.
That's a unhelpful review.
Yeah, it's not helpful at all. Emmanuel Noisette of the Movie Blog. A sensational send-off of Daniel Craig's James Bond. You know, you make fun of me for being impressed by jingling keys. Have you seen some
on occasion? No. Yeah, look. What do you want me to say about that guy? Look, if you want to call this sensational, I certainly can't stop you from doing so, but we have a very different perspective on what constitutes a sensational film.
Kimber Myers of Crooked Marquee, top critic, Red Star, one of the best of the best. This 25th film in the franchise is at once on brand with the 24 films that preceded it, while managing new possibilities for the almost 60-year-old series.
Can I have I need to say this. I saw a number of people. I saw this from other critics. The line that No Time to Die fully brings James Bond into the modern era, and I don't have words for that.
Because what they're really saying is James Bond has his dick and balls ripped off, and that's what we like about it.
Well, no, what they're saying, he dies.
Okay.
And we'd really rather he were dead.
Without his dick and balls. No dick and balls. Speaking of dick and balls, Leonard Maltin of LeonardMaltin.com. Top critic.
Wait. Yes, I get... Okay. I've wanted to say this to Leonard Maltin for a long time now. You self-employed loser. You write for your own website now. You're not in a publication of note.
I'm glad that makes you happy.
It really does. Like, irrationally so.
The caretakers of the intellectual property known as James Bond, knowing that their newest effort would be the last one to start Daniel Craig, decided to spare no expense to make this an epic entry in the series. I just wish there were less of it.
Hang on. I'm genuinely curious where he fell on the pass-fail scale, because that's how Rotten Tomatoes determines fresh or splat. But I actually don't really disagree with that. Like, that was one of our big complaints, was you didn't need all this.
Yeah. No. Paul Saffin of AM/FM magazine. It's worth the wait and is absolutely worth going to see on the big screen. It's big, bold, fun, and even more lighthearted in some ways than it has been in years.
Get bent!
But then it hits you with an emotional depth you won't see coming.
Okay,
sir,
listen, buddy.
Sir, I don't think there's a DVD box for you to get on. It's fine. Calm the fuck down.
Look, listen, buddy. There's an emotional depth to this if you choose to believe all women when Madeline says this is not your child to James Bond about the 5-year-old girl. Very, like, with his eyes. And then, never mind that immediately after that, Rami Malek is sitting there going, James, this is your daughter. Don't you understand? Like, how is that a surprise? Like, it's a little bit, don't get me wrong, giving James Bond a child is a potentially interesting way to take that character, and given some of the things they did with this iteration of Bond, I was somewhat interested. Then, of course, they ruin it by killing the guy for no good reason, but c'est la vie. Yeah, no, this thing's emotional core did not come out of nowhere. It's very clearly established. If you couldn't follow it, well, I'm sorry you had to pay attention.
Mariana and Neal of Impression Blend. Had they nailed the villain here, this would have undoubtedly been one of the best entries in the entire Bond franchise, of which she's only seen the past 4.
Okay, couple of one, yes. However, there is truth to that. If they had nailed the villain, this could have been. You want to know how to do that? I didn't get to this when we were doing the movie review, so let me give you my quick pitch for how to make this ending better. Real simple. You don't kill Blofeld. In fact, you have Safin kill all the. You still have Safin kill all the Spectre agents. Then it's revealed that Blofeld's been playing him, and Blofeld is the one who tries to use this thing to take over the world. Like, that's the finale you need, not James Bond in front of Rami Malek at a Japanese sitting table while he's wearing a again like a kimono with kabuki masks in the background. Because why exactly?
Where am I? Japan? No, Norway. What? Alan in Film Threat. It is everything you expect from Bond and appropriately honors Daniel Craig for his service to the Queen.
No, not so sure about that. Look, hang on. This movie is suffering a little bit from what was it? Fast 7 syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody saw the epilogue, the codetta at the end of that was their tribute to Paul Walker, which was beautiful and heartfelt and touching. It has nothing to do with the movie. And if you want to judge the movie as the movie, you actually have to stop after Jason Statham is put in prison, and that's the movie you judge. What follows is, like I said, a wonderful tribute to a person that meant a lot to those people, and I'm not trying to dump on that, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the movie.
So I don't think we've liked a single thing Armin White has ever written from National Review.
This does not surprise me.
No Time to Die proves that the decades-old James Bond franchise has reached a dead end. The turn towards sadism that began with Daniel Craig's angry, sinister interpretation of 007 has reached an unconscionable level of heartlessness. This might be the most woke man on Earth, Robert Winfree.
This boggles my mind a little bit. I mean this in all sincerity, sir. I lived through James Bond shoving a man into a torpedo that was comprised of drill teeth while mocking him about the first rule of mass media. I watched James Bond fire a blunt nuclear rod through a man's chest. Are you, sir, seriously intimating that what does James Bond do that's sadistic? What does Bond do that's sadistic here?
All right, we got to do a few more of these, and then we got to go.
You, sir, you are a silly, silly man.
He wants all the girls to pay attention to him, and maybe some of the boys. Ryan Cyrick of The Reader of Omaha, Nebraska. The only reason this isn't the most embarrassing thing Rami Malek has ever done is because he won an Oscar for a Bryan Singer movie. Yeah, I knew that would pop you. That's why I read it.
Oh, that's good. That's pretty good. I approve.
All right. Let's see if I can find a really good one from one of our favorites here, and then we'll call it a night. Hang on. What is that? What is this person saying? Peter Rayner of Christian Science Monitor, top critic.
Oh, God.
Beautiful people abound, and 007 still knows how to fill out a tux. Woo-hoo. I had a reasonably good time at it, but as I watched the latest installment, the thought also occurred to me, has James Bond become irrelevant? Oh, eat a dick.
Well, hang on. Look, he brought up an interesting there is a somewhat interesting point there that I do think needs to be somewhat discussed here.
Yes.
There's actually the scene where M goes, there was a time when we could get into a room with these people.
Yeah, that's a good scene.
It is. It's a wonderful scene, and it does kind of touch on something that goes to the James Bond film, more in addition to like just within world. In a cinematic landscape that has largely eschewed subtlety and espionage and thinking, what does James Bond do other than become horribly silly, or this like Mission Impossible Jason Bourne mashup? And I think that's a fair question.
Okay, but I think that's not the question he's
no
getting at.
For him, no. Like he's pointlessly going for quasi clickbait to go, is this beloved 60-year-old film franchise that has evolved multiple times across multiple iterations, might this be irrelevant given what James Bond is and what he represents? And no, buddy, get bent.
In that particular portion of his review, the only thing that wasn't included, it might be in the full review, is the phrase toxic masculinity. That's what he was talking about there.
I know. And in that respect, yeah, he's an idiot.
Right. But that's why I told him to suck a dick.
But I did want to bring up, I think there is, this moron has his stupid point overlaps just a bit with a real point.
Yes. The question about what do you do with James Bond in the 2020s, I think is food for an interesting discussion. The idea that we can't have James Bond because how dare we have masculine men masculinating? Eat a dick.
100%.
Speaking of eat a dick, last one. Alyssa Wilkinson of Vox, top critic. I once posted an article from Vox and immediately got a response from John that said, "Don't you know better than that?" So anyway,
well, you do now, if nothing else.
Yeah, really. I don't post from there or giant freaking robot anymore.
Yeah, but you still cite Variety for some reason.
You can eat a dick too. It feels like 2019's Avengers Endgame, like the end of a cycle, a grand epic about sacrifice and the future of mankind. But it also gives us a Bond with more emotion and maybe even humanity than many of his predecessors seem to possess.
I think you are. I'm going to come back to what James Bond is. James Bond is not a character that needs a tremendous amount of humanity. Neither is Sherlock Holmes. It doesn't mean you want them to be robots, although I'm pretty sure there is there's a Sherlock Holmes adaptation where he is a robot. I'm 90% sure. Wouldn't shock me, one iota. But when you give them arcs like this, it does somewhat detract from kind of the appeal of a James Bond. And again, the same is true of Sherlock Holmes, or to an extent Indiana Jones, or you can name them. You could run down the list of all of the Conan, right? You watch a Conan movie to watch Conan do Conan things. Are there going to be things in there that are supposed to kind of keep you engaged? Sure. But take Conan the Barbarian. There much of an arc for Conan?
No.
Not really. He gets revenge. Like that's kind of it. Does he learn a lesson? Not really. He falls in love at one point, but that's not an arc. That's a thing. Especially in that movie. Like maybe I'm not saying you can't have a romantic movie where falling in love is your character's arc. You can.
Sure.
But Conan's arc is not about falling in love and finding, people that matter to it. Like Conan's arc is the arc of Conan is the arc of his sword as it slices through your neck. And deviating too much from that does kind of detract from what makes these characters interesting. And you can't do this with every character, but for the subset of characters that have become iconic in that respect, yeah, you kind of can and you kind of should. All right. I think the last thing I want to do here, since we're kind of talking about this franchise in general, the producers and whatnot have come out and said, we're not even going to start talking about who the next James Bond is going to be until next year, which I think is fair. the three front runners that I've seen kind of discussed around online are Tom Hardy, Idris Elba, and Henry Cavill.
All good choices.
I would agree with that. I'm somewhat irrationally rooting for Henry Cavill only for the following reason. Because if he gets to be Geralt of Rivia and Superman and James Bond, yes, give that man everything. Henry Cavill's awesome. Did you see this clip that floated around? I mean, you might not appreciate what he does here, but when promoting, I forget what he was promoting. Somebody asked him, "So, what's your favorite science fiction franchise? Star Trek or Star Wars?" And without hesitating, the man said Gundam. His is a nerddom that is so pure. Yeah, give that man James Bond, please.
Okay, I'm going to irrationally root for Idris Elba because The Wire.
I would be very interested to see Elba do it. He's a little bit of an older guy. I mean, they could pretty easily not play that, but I don't object to a slightly older James Bond. Let's meet him when he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, that's my let's sign Idris Elba to a 3-picture deal with Amazon and MGM, and let's go back to the Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, episodic, compartmentalized James Bond doing James Bond stuff. Let's give this a couple of years off, and then let's come back with Idris Elba having a grand old time being James Bond, doing fun James Bond things. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and just for the record, any of those three that I think are the front runners, I don't think you could go wrong with any of them.
No, Tom Hardy's a good actor, and I'm not going to get into the debate with you about his mumble peg delivery, because apparently in Bronson he's fucking Shakespeare or some shit. So
look, you just have seen Tom Hardy in for some reason. Your exposure to his work has largely been stuff where they've asked him to do weird stuff with it. He's Mad Max.
Even Inception, though, I couldn't understand a word he was saying.
That's because you can't follow his accent. That's not a delivery issue with him in Inception. That's
all right. So yesterday we had a whole bunch of stuff drop today. Everyone loves a bad guy for slashers. I threw up. We're building up towards the Caleb Plant Canelo fight, so I'm reposting on our webpage the 2 fights that got Canelo to where he is, the 2 fights that got Caleb Plant to where he is, to where they're meeting for the undisputed super middleweight title. That's up on the webpage, but those are old shows that are already the audio was already available. Just starting Sunday night, we had myself and Robert did a alternative commentary for Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3. We also streamed live to Twitch, so there's video of us reacting to it if you're interested in that sort of thing.
If you're curious, that is our best performing video podcast right now that was released in the month of October.
Myself and Sean did an audio only for Halloween Resurrection because his equipment was not working. We did almost 3 hours last night on Midnight Mass. It was myself, Benjamin Cologne. It was the most animated I've ever seen Benjamin Cologne. And Alexis Haina. And
now that's not
Robert.
fair. You've seen him draw himself before. Acknowledge my pun.
I threw up again. When I say I put up, it's a combination of just creating a webpage for and also releasing old archive material. So all of our Lordy shows are now available. Collection, Monstereophonic, and Demonocracy, or whatever the hell it was called, and Sexorcism. That's all up and available and on the webpage and on YouTube. We had an obituary album that's up again. The self-titled obituary album, and and 2 Steel Panthers. I released those as well. So those are all up and available. Hang on. Uber leaving Glob and Gobin. I think that's it for the stuff that I re-released again. Yeah, Midnight Mass, Slashers. Oh, Mastodon. That's the one I couldn't remember. I was like, I know there's another one. Mastodon has a new album coming out. So we threw up a web page for Mastodon Emperor of Sand, which we reviewed in 2017. Again, the audio has always been available, but Now you can check it out on the website as well. As far as what we're doing the rest of the week, tomorrow we're doing the new Monster Magnet album that came out earlier this year. It's a covers album. I like to do like covers albums in October, so I usually wait for October to do them. Excuse me. So check out the new Monster Magnet review. We'll have myself and Ronnie Adams. Ronnie Adams was not going to let me get through another October without talking about the Halloween movie. So we somehow managed to not do the original ever. We've done 3, we've done 2, we've done Resurrection, we've done all kinds of Halloween movies, and we never actually did the original. We did a comic book.
I believe at some point we talked about the Rob Zombie movie, Halloween.
No, we've never done that. That's on the calendar for next year, and Jason jumped on that grenade for me. So we may have mentioned it in passing. We've never done an official show on it. In any case, Ronnie and I this Thursday will review the original Halloween movie, the one that started it all. And then this weekend, we've got a re-airing of our Evil Dead trilogy just in time for the anniversary of the Evil Dead movie, which there's like a Fathom event for where you can go see it on the big screen. Sunday,
if that's showing in your area, if you've never seen the original Evil Dead on big screen, it's look, if you think I've said this before about the first Evil Dead, the laughs you get out of it are more like low production value, but it's designed to be a horror movie.
Right.
When you get to Army of Darkness, certainly, but also Evil Dead 2, that's when you're getting more into the splat stick, which is hilarious and great. But Evil Dead is actually a surprisingly effective horror movie for what it is.
This is my boomstick. We have a re-airing of our Peanuts review. Possibly
all right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Honestly, it's probably the most positive review we've ever done. I don't think we had a bad thing to say about the Peanuts movie.
I certainly didn't.
David and I will be reviewing, doing an on trial for the 1984, I believe it is, Dune, which I actually just watched today. What a fucking bizarre movie that is. Tuesday
Mark,
night.
I want you to know, David Lynch is a damaged human being.
Now I want to go back and watch Dark Highway again. We're gonna have a re-airing of the Mummy trilogy that Gavin and I reviewed a bunch of years back, and then we'll have a review. It'll be myself, Jason Teasley, Ronnie Adams, and Robert reviewing Halloween Kills. On Wednesday, we'll have another Mania of WrestleMania, this time 8 and 9, and then we'll have a Metal Hammer of Doom for Einstein Kills, the Silver Scream 2. Welcome to Horrorwood. Thursday is the 4 Kings of Boxing. We finally get to the fights now, so we're going to be talking Chapter 5, Sugar Ray versus Roberto Duran, who punched out a horse 1 and 2. Not 3, just 1 and 2.
You really need a better introduction for Roberto Duran than who once punched out a horse.
He once punched out a horse.
You have a clip for that, don't you?
I'm busy right now. Cradle of Filth. That's when I'm beating a dead horse, not when I'm talking about punching a horse. There's a difference.
Well, Mungo punches a live horse in that clip. If you want a clip about flogging a dead horse, there's other clips.
Anyway, Cradle of Filth has a new album coming out, Existence is Futile. So I went back and dug in the archives, and hey, there's a Cradle of Filth album that we hadn't released yet. So on this new feed. So check out our re-airing of Cradle of Filth, Hammer of the Witches, which will drop on Friday. And then our trivia that Jesse and Alexis hosted on horror movies will drop the 30th.
Here's something I found on the web. According to
Alexa, stop! Not only did I accidentally trigger my Alexa, but I skipped an entire week and jumped to the 30th for no good reason. All right, go ahead and do your plugs. I'll be right back.
All right. You can find me mostly covering things over in 411manias.com. 411mania.com. I can speak. I cover professional wrestling 3 days a week. Mondays, AEW's Dark Elevation. Wednesdays, MLW's Fusion Alpha, as long as they continue to air it. And Fridays, WWE SmackDown. So if you're interested in my thoughts over there, please do stop by, say hello. I appreciate it. I cover mixed martial arts on Saturdays mostly. So this Saturday I will be covering UFC on ESPN Plus 52. It's not a good card, but please stop. Look, here's all I want from you. If you'll do me this kindness, just leave a comment in the if you're even remotely interested, leave a comment in the live coverage I would really like it if all of you could spell out a recipe for like tomato soup. Like that would be nice. I don't think you will, but as a random ask, some of these cards, man, they're not great, and I occasionally get depressed because it feels like no one cares. And sometimes I know that no one cares, and that doesn't bother me. Other times I know no one cares, and it really crushes my soul just a little bit. So, if you're interested, do that. Mark mentioned that he and I did live watch along for Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury 3. That was a good time. That's up in the archives. Please give it a listen. I also host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. This last week was mostly talking about Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury 3 because the UFC event was meh and the upcoming event is meh, and Fury Wilder 3 was kind of awesome. So that gets the lion's share of coverage, and it's my show. I can do what I want with it. So this upcoming week will be a review of UFC and ESPN Plus 53 and a preview of the next event, which is headlined by a legitimate middleweight main event between two former title challengers, Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori. So if you want to hear my full preview of that, this next coming Saturday evening / Monday morning, that will go live. Mark mentioned our review of Midnight Mass. We had a good time talking about that, about faith, what it means, how we get to it, the nature of life, man's search for meaning, and the inevitable push to avoid death at most possibilities, although not all. It was a good time, Mark.
All right, folks. You're done.
Halloween Kills this next coming week here on Damn You Hollywood. Please come back. It will be a good time.
And yeah, if you check us out on the Twitch stream tonight or on Facebook or on Twitter,
all right.
Anytime that we are live on video, we're not doing it for the audio only shows, obviously, but anytime that we're video, we'll be up on all the socials, so you can actually watch us live, or you can, or hey, here's a thought: you can listen to the podcast. Remember when those were a thing?
No.
And on that note, be well, be safe, and behave.